Today we're going to be looking at expanding on some of the topics we were talking about in the previous presentation. And frankly, what we're looking at is wireframes, sitemaps, annotations, and things of that nature. You guys may think that the little bit that we talked about it the other day is like more than enough, but the reality is this is a really important part of the process. Some of the conversations that we were having, we started to kind of get into that mode. We're really talking about what is needed to create a site, what a site should look like, what functionality it should have, why it should have that functionality, who's using it, what's our content strategy, all that stuff, right? These are things you really need to think about before it's like download WordPress, install it, choose a theme, and put stuff into it. That isn't necessarily the best approach. And you see that over and over again when you look at websites. And as you guys get a little better understanding of what goes into building a site, and then you start looking at other sites, you'll start to recognize it's like, oh, they just got a theme and they stuck stuff in there. You know, you can start to recognize it pretty quick compared to a site that's really well designed, that has intent and purpose. All right. The really the main point of a wireframe, and I know you guys know what they look like, and we're going to look at some as we progress, is really kind of to help you narrow down really what you're doing and what you're trying to build. It really comes down to that, like building a house is easier if you have a blueprint, because you do all the thinking on paper so that you don't have to like tear down walls after you've built them because you realize that, oops, I forgot to run the electricity through here or something like that. You know, it's just part of the planning process, really. All right. I think you guys know what they look like, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that slide. Low fidelity, yes. What's interesting about wireframes, though, is they are becoming more and more electronic. There's really some top-notch tools out there where you can actually start to build stuff electronically that looks like rough drawings even, right? You know, black and white, placeholder images. But some of those tools can actually, the higher end ones, can actually start rendering to HTML. And I did mention to you guys a couple of tools. We'll look at them today, actually. And, you know, there's all these new products in the mix now, too. I had the pleasure of talking with some of the graphic arts people again yesterday. And, you know, they've shifted their teaching approach where they used to teach Dreamweaver, and they used to teach some rudimentary coding and then kind of show you what Dreamweaver can do with it. Now they've moved away from that. They've gone the opposite direction of what we've done, which is now they're working just in Muse because it's just strictly graphical. I mean, you still have to know some stuff, and it can still create a production website, but it's very graphical. You can pick something up and just move it. You can't really do that with the kind of tools that we are employing, which is coding, you know. But the point there is that they can really focus on what it looks like, how it functions, how things interact from that holistic perspective. Okay, and so really we have tools, and Muse is a really excellent product in that it kind of combines those features. So from a user experience design standpoint, it's not a bad starting point, even if you don't actually use that to create the code. At least you can create proof of concept. And that's a big part of it. All right, you know, where you're going to put stuff on the page is huge, honestly. We've talked many times about where navigation should go, what the conventions are, why we follow conventions, why we might break conventions. But one thing that we don't think a lot about are, at least as beginning developers and designers, are these things called calls to action. Yeah, I think you think about all the other four little bullets there quite a bit. But you know, when I think like call to action, you know, I'm thinking of stuff, you know, like this. All right, so here's Facebook. You type in Facebook, and unless you're automatically logged in, this is where you land. Like my habit is never to stay logged in. That's me. I don't run it on my phone either, especially when I look at the permission set that it wants. Pretty much control the phone even more than you can. That's kind of a scary thought, really. All right, but what's the call to action here? There's calls to action. What are they? Right? Yeah, that's it. What else are you going to do here? Well, there's actually more stuff. You know, there's all this, things going on down here. But that's it, right? You're either going to log in, and you notice the login area is really small because a lot of people just stay logged in. So you go to Facebook and you're right in your account. So then the other call to action really is sign up. Yes. And there's lots of sites like that. And frankly, I pick on like the social media sites. I don't know why I couldn't just type .com there. All right, and apparently I'm logged in. All right, so yep, that's me. How the heck do I log out? No, it's not. No, absolutely not. Yeah, right. This is a great website. Once you're on the site, you can't log out. That's almost not funny. Help! Get me out of here.
What about the ellipsis above your name? Yeah, that's not interesting. No, over above your name.
Thanks, Celia. All right. And the reason I wanted to do that is I know what their splash screens look like where you come into the site. Once again, really good example of call to action. There's also some really interesting design elements here. Okay, aside from the fact that the background is moving, right? And then I want you to start questioning yourself, how do they do that?
Yeah.
And there's a number of different ways they can accomplish it. You can actually do that with CSS, believe it or not. Right? Because you guys should have learned in Web 2 that with CSS you can do animations. And if you have images, well, notice it stopped. Right? They must have sat there and figured out, somebody comes to this screen, within like 10 or 15 seconds, they're either clicking on something or they're out of here. So that's as long as the animation has to last. But boy, what a cool effect that is. And as you look at that animation, notice one design technique that helps to create depth. First of all, they have this box that's in the center. This is your call to action. They have an image, kind of pulls your attention a little bit. I'm not really sure what it's supposed to show. Well, for me, you know what that shows? Yeah, it's very female-centric. It really is. It's a female-centric social media. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I have an account on it, right? Right. That's right. They are really showing both that it's a visual medium, that it tends to target women and a certain type of demographic of women, really, if you start to analyze it. But more so from the design perspective, we do have the call to action. Their big call to action is very similar to Facebook's.
So do you search a lot of food? Is that why that popped up on your page?
It's complicated. I'm not Jim Gaffigan, let's just put it that way. But okay, so there's the sign up thing, and that's the big part, because they figure that most people, like me, who just went to Pinterest, I mean, I couldn't even figure out how to log out, right? So I'm just logged in. And then they have a login button up here at the top. These are calls to action. Do something. What are you going to do? Sign up, or are you out of here? Now, the other interesting design aspect, now going back to visuals, is look at that background. Not only did it move, which is eye-catching, but it's kind of out of focus. But the foreground is real sharp. What effect does that create? Depth. It's the illusion of depth, because your eye, and you don't think about it typically, I'm looking at my hand, I'm not realizing that everything in the background is like double vision, blurry, because I'm focused on my hand. And that's the effect they're trying to create here. So that's kind of a neat technique. It's not hard to do. It's very, very simple to do. Yeah, it's a little bit of a blur. So some of those blurry pictures you take can have a purpose too. All right, so that's a call to action.
So if you continue with Facebook and you're not logged into Facebook, it can't pull it.
Mm, I'm not sure I understand your question, I guess. Oh, this? Oh, that's what you mean. Oh, yeah.
Form and login information to Facebook.
Well, if you're signed into Facebook and you click this button, it recognizes that, and then it just uses your Facebook login criteria as a login here.
But you have to have it open already and be logged in.
You have to be open and logged in.
Like a state, which searches it, right? As an admin or something. That's
Well,
crazy.
well, yeah, there's a couple different methods that they use. No, I didn't configure it that way. This is the login screen. Like if I choose right now to connect with Facebook, and I'm already logged into Facebook on this browser, it just pops me right in and I have an account.
Right.
There's a number of different ways that happens. With Facebook, I think they've kind of changed their approach now. Basically, the systems are linked, basically. So,
That's crazy to think about the way that works, because it's like two companies too. Like, is that almost like not a? I mean, how are they intertwined? If they pay, they have to maybe.
I mean, obviously one feeds off of the other. I mean, that's not really the point of why we're looking at
No,
this
I know, but
at
it's
this
very
screen.
interesting the way at first when you start looking at the way the forms feed into each other, now it would automatically grab information.
Well, since we're talking about that ability to connect through Facebook, basically you're using their login system to authenticate on a different system. What's interesting is when you guys start doing some SharePoint development, there's tools that are built into Visual Studio that allow you to do exactly that. That you can create a login for your site that ties into the Facebook authentication system, or the Google Plus system, or there's a few others. The Microsoft system.
So we'll learn that when we SharePoint.
Yeah, you'll learn a little bit about it. That capability does exist, though.
Because that's pretty real. I mean, obviously it's realistic.
Yeah, but a lot of people choose it. There are times when I use that sort of login approach, and it's usually for silly little apps, and I just usually use my Google Plus, not Facebook.
I just wonder what kind of code you would.
All right, what's an annotation? Yes, it's basically, do you guys ever watch like videos on YouTube, and like people are afraid to talk, so they just like put like little boxes with words on the screen?
Gosh, this is so annoying.
Those are annotation.
Or they bring up Notepad and go, hi,
Uh-huh.
I
Yes.
did it, and they delete it. I today I deleted it. It's like, yeah, watch this.
No, but
Yeah.
all right, we're making too much of a social commentary here, I think. Yeah, but people do it. Sometimes people have really strong accents, or they're just embarrassed of their voice, so you shouldn't really judge. That takes effort, Jake. That takes effort. All right, so annotations are just basically ways that when we're working with wireframes or mock-ups or sitemaps or whatever, when we're doing designing, even if you just do screenshots of things, annotations provide additional information basically that help to clarify what you're looking at. And when you're doing wireframes and you just like put a generic button on the screen, sometimes you have to explain what that button's going to do. Like this button is going to integrate with Facebook and use their authentication system to sign up a new user, right? So not only is it like authenticating you, but it's also pulling in your profile information. And it also has a link so that if you're like on Pinterest and you post something, you can actually have it post to Facebook too. It's kind of crazy.
Not to mention track that how in our projects do we decide what things are going to be good for the client as far as social media to ask them if they want to integrate into it, like Facebook, like LinkedIn, like.
That takes a little bit of forethought. Having social media icons on web pages has been kind of a big trend for the last 3, 4, or 5 years, to the point where people just put it on there because they think they have to put it on there, frankly. I mean, it's kind of like, well, they've got a smartphone, well, I've got a smartphone too. I mean, it's really kind of that mentality. without sometimes any thought as to whether it's even relevant to what they're doing. Okay, I'm trying to think of the projects you guys are working on right now. Does Big Sisters need a Facebook button? I think it works. Do you think they need a Pinterest?
I can see how it could be useful for gather. It's email oriented.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then you have to look at how Pinterest is used too. All right, should they have a LinkedIn? Not. Why would you need a LinkedIn? Where are you linking to? I mean, well, your rationale is not off, but who are you doing LinkedIn with? Who in the organization? Organizations don't have LinkedIn pages. People do. Do you see the difference? And then if you're in an organization, you don't have a personal page like you guys have on Facebook. You have a page. It's different than a profile. And the approach is different. And then, does Big Sisters need a Twitter? I don't think so.
I think it depends who's going to monitor it. Like, are they going to have someone to monitor it?
Well, there you go. That's another thing.
Like, who's going to monitor it?
They don't have an office.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so, all right, Shelley's thinking the right thing. Would they have events? Well, maybe we could tweet out an event. But how many of you actively use Twitter?
I just started, but I have noticed that there's things that will combine all of it and send it automatically out for you, like
It will.
modernizing all of them. So, like, I can understand
To some
how
degree.
that could work. I mean, I've been using like some social media for a while though, and I can't even understand how to put them all together in this new app that they have. So I'm like,
Yeah, it's not quite as
it's
smooth.
not very user-friendly.
Windows, since Windows 8 has their social media thing that's built into the interface, and you can tie together all your different social media and it'll propagate directly into Windows. That's like when I get my little birthday notifications up on the screen once in a while. That's because when I first set up this machine, and it was Windows 8 originally, I put in my Twitter and my Facebook and so, just to play with it to see what it does. And now like the legacy of it is I know when people's birthdays are.
You mean like the one that comes with your computer?
Right. So, all right, that's nothing to do with annotations, but some of the things that annotations might be used for is because you might put visual components up on the screen, but just because you have a button or you have a form or you have a menu doesn't necessarily mean that the person looking at your design understand what it's going to be used for.
But that's where you, in an annotation is where you would display the interaction rules, so that could be important.
Yeah, well,
What's it going to do?
what's it going to do? What happens if? What's the purpose? What details do we need to know? What stuff do we need to know in order to be able to even build what we're looking at? All right. So I got a couple slides here. These are just dumped straight from the book. And who uses this stuff and why? And you can see we have a number of different categories of users. So people fall into all these categories. And now, as you look at these categories, think about the roles that you've developed within your teams, right? Project management, okay, well, you kind of are really all involved in that. I mean, hypothetically, your project lead should kind of be like overseeing certain aspects, like maybe the pacing of tasks or helping keep people on track. But it's really a holistic thing. There's people that analyze, the financial aspects of things, the legal aspects of things. You have the people that do the visual aspects, people that like create copy, right? The words that go on the page, like what is being said. You have people that do SEO, right? SEO very often gets bundled with social media. So what strategies are we using to be able to drive search traffic? In some cases the search stuff doesn't even matter, right? Do you think Blackboard needs to be SEO? No, because you have to log in anyhow. I mean, what's it going to do?
Remarketing for it, though.
Yeah, but with Blackboard, they might have like a corporate page that might have SEO, but logging into the system is completely irrelevant. So, and then, there's one little box out of all these roles that, we think that we fall into, which is the developers, the people who actually do some of the coding. Um, and notice here for developers, it says in some cases the wireframes may be used as the basis for proof of concept. So developers, even though you guys might be code focused, and even if you're working with a template, and I'm looking here at you PC tech people, and you already have all your content pumped in pretty much, you really don't have like a finished version to go to the client and say this is what it's going to look like. But if you do a wireframe, you could piece something together and say this is what we're shooting for. And we're in progress right now. And that's why I'm always concerned that if you're showing a partial work in progress, that the person looking at it might not be able to see the end product. So that's where wireframes come in. Wireframes come in to say, well, right now the button sits in the middle, but our plan is to move it over to the side. Because what you might get is, oh my God, the button's in the middle, I hate it. Right? So if you have a wireframe, a proof of concept, it helps with that approach. Quality assurance, well, you guys have never dealt with any of that stuff, but okay, Carl, you worked in an organization that was big enough. When I was in my first IT job, it fell under the umbrella of quality assurance, which was really kind of a strange thing. Because the department I worked for was responsible for curriculum, books, technology, like all these like weird, basically non-teaching things. Yeah, it was basically the other category. All right, and then there's the users and the clients, the people you're building the website for, and then ultimately the people that are using it. And this is so often overlooked, it's scary. And if you're not building your website thinking about how people are using it, who is using it, you're walking the wrong path. I'm just telling you right now. Okay, sticking with PC tech, right? Who's going to be using that website? Customers or potential customers? Probably more so potential customers going, I need to fix my computer. I hate those people at the Geek Squad. Where am I going to take it? I'd like to find a little local shop to do it.
Well, I think also though, like, since I'm one who's talking to the client, and I've got to find out like where he's headed in his business, because when he talks to me about like the computer stuff, but also like he has like a security system, something or other. He's in so many things that like it's like, okay, well, what is going to be your focus? Because he wants to like have all this stuff that he used to do, but he doesn't do it anymore.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, that's trying to figure out what the client wants, and that's your last box there, right? Because you're trying to build something for somebody, and if they don't have a clear vision of what they're doing, it creates an issue too.
Yeah. Because like he gave us his stuff, right? Like I've got like his PC Tech Bible that he gave me, everything that he used to have, and he wants this, but like.
Even if it's not, it's just.
You have it though, right?
And like this is our guideline, but like you don't do design for websites anymore at your business.
I guess the thing that I think is, if the client wants that on his website, we'll put it on his website. It's not our business to tell him, we don't do this anymore, so you shouldn't have it on.
Well, yeah, in the situation you guys are in, that's most likely the case. And if you're a gun for hire, I mean, ultimately it's the client that chooses.
Right. But just asking, I just gotta ask him like, what do you want on there?
All right, but switch caps here, right? Instead of you guys being a firm doing something for an outside client, what if the client is the firm that you work for, right? So you have a department internally that does design for the websites, because companies can have many websites,
Right.
internal sites, external sites, private sites, whatever. How does that change it? Well, then you do ask these questions, right? How does this, why would we have quality assurance or business analysts in the mix?
To see if it's important for them.
Yeah,
What's
exactly.
important to you as a business? Like, what do you want to, like, because as a business, if you focus on 5 things and don't do any of them well, but there's really 2 things that if you focused on that you could make money on, then you want to do that, right? Because
Maybe.
why be like, oh, we do all these things, but there's only one or two people that work here, so we can't really do all these things.
Well,
we can do these two things.
Can I give you a business perspective on that? Sometimes you might do something in your business that might not be your main line of work, and you might not even do it that well, but just the fact that you're offering it and taking away business from somebody else is reason enough to do it, right? Because, you know, these guys are doing it and they have no competition. Even if we pick up just a little bit of that, it's not our main thing, but hey, keeps them from getting the business.
Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, who are you working with? What are you doing? All right, some tools out there. Well, let's look at the ones that are really silly on this list, right? You guys know what Keynote is? No, you guys aren't Mac people. It's the Mac version of PowerPoint. So why would I have PowerPoint and Keynote up here as like a wireframing or prototyping kind of tool? Yeah. Think about how PowerPoint, the shape of the slides are kind of like a screen. I can take images and drop them in for a background and bring in shapes and text. Heck, I can even make things click in PowerPoint and click between slides and do animations. I could do like rudimentary proof of concept in PowerPoint pretty easily. So if you guys are ever wireframing for a client, it might not be a bad tool to use. As silly as it seems, it's got enough tools built in. You could even do like graphic manipulations inside of PowerPoint. So just a consideration. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And Visio, do I not even have it on the list here? Let's add Visio to the list. It should be on here. And that's basically a diagramming tool. Right. And you know, like an example, the kind of stuff that Visio is probably most often used for. I'm trying to find. There we go. All right, here's an example of a Visio diagram. We're moving all of our server equipment from the software department, the networking department, CSS, and web. It's all going to be centralized in Racine. And we're planning out the server racks and what's going where, so we know how it's going to fit. And we have one rack here that's going to have all of our SharePoint stuff. And I don't know if this is how they're going to end up going. This is just somebody's idea. But Visio has tools built into it that very easily allow you, for example, okay, well, we need a rack. Okay, so we have an image of a rack. We pull it onto the screen. We need a server that takes up 2 unit spaces like this. All right, well, let's grab one and drop it in, put a little label on it. It also has things for flow charting, network diagrams, organizational charts. I mean, you can do all kind of little graphical kind of little boxes and drawings and lines and shapes and, yeah, floor plans. I mean, it's a very flexible tool, but one of the things it can be used for, if you want, is wireframing. It's not a bad tool for doing something like that. It wouldn't be my first choice, though, but, you know, that's just an example of the kind of thing that you can create with it. Some other tools here that are kind of interesting. InDesign. You guys ever hear of InDesign? Greg, you probably have like been maybe introduced to it. InDesign is basically a page layout piece of software. So it's designed for use by people that most typically do print media. So if you were like laying out the contents of a book, you would use this piece of software to drop in your images, your text, your typography, pages linked together. You can create a whole book. You deliver it as one file to the printing company. They open it up. Boom, it's all ready to go. The interesting thing about InDesign, though, in the last 4 or 5 years, they've added these capabilities that you can actually author web pages with the tool, mobile apps, ebooks, and all these different things. And you can do it pretty easily. I mean, once you know the interface and what you're doing. But as a result, once again, kind of like PowerPoint, you can create images and things that are clickable and move from screen to screen and really kind of simulate the behavior of a website. And if you don't know how to code, you can conceptualize it at least and deliver it to somebody that does know how to code and say, this is what I want to build. If you can get me close to this and behave like this, we're good. And that's what a lot of it is about. It's about concept. And concept should be driven by certain things.
So it's like programming.
Sort of. What I would encourage you to do, though, is you have access to the product, Greg. Go to the Adobe website and just do a quick search of, like, what can you do with InDesign? And, InDesign is kind of the inheritor of a long stream of desktop publishing software packages like Pagemaker and Quark Express. Yeah, FrameMaker, thank you. Yeah, I had a copy of Pagemaker that I bought back in the early 90s, and I paid like $500 for it, just for a piece of software. I paid so much money for it, I still kept it because I paid so much money for it, just to look at the 3.5-inch floppies. But it was a really powerful program, same kind of piece of software that professional publishing houses use, newspapers, magazines, book editors, etc. So, all right. This is kind of weird, and it really, in a way, kind of dates the book a little bit. But Fireworks is a product that was developed by a company called Macromedia, same company that originally developed Dreamweaver and Flash, and it was their version of an image manipulation tool. Fireworks had the capability of working with both raster graphics, bitmap, little pixels, and vector graphics combined. That was pretty revolutionary when it came out. It also has the capability of creating some interactive components that kind of cross the line into like other products where it's almost Flash-like, but not really. You could create certain types of effects with it, like moving and animated objects. But another thing that you could do is that it did have these little components like Visio, where I could pull in a button, pull in a drop-down menu, pull in a box for text, a box for image, just to create a rough representation of what I want to create. And in some capacities, it was also able to output that to really crude HTML formats that you could then later manipulate. That product has been retired. But I did notice that, and I can actually check it, I think I can still download it. All right. Well, I don't see it listed here in their app list anymore. And maybe I'm just looking too quickly. They probably still have it out there in the libraries for download.
Did you say when you go through graphics classes, you get rid of the math stuff too? Is that what you do?
Yeah, if you're in the graphic arts program, they go through all those. Yeah, I mean, you'll learn how to do graphics, photography, vectors, animation, video, film, design, all that kind of stuff. It's not a bad skill set to have. The people that I see that are really good with development that also have good design skills, you are so employable, it's scary. Yeah. Because, I mean, it is kind of an oversaturated market in a way, but only in the sense that there's lots of graphic designers and there's lots of web people. There's not that many that do both and are good at both. And if you're good at both, and if you get a job in one, like, oh yeah, I know Photoshop, great. Do you know any HTML? And not really. Or you're going to hire the guy that's like, yeah, look at these are all the websites I've done. And there's a crossover. The other reason why it's important is because then you're able to communicate in an intelligent way with somebody who's working on the other side of the fence. So, like, for example, I am no expert in any of these like Adobe tools. Well, maybe some more than others, but I know enough how to get into Photoshop and adjust an image and crop it and shape it and output it in an efficient format, and enough to take like source materials and tweak them to my needs. And if I didn't know how to do that, what would I be doing? Dealing with bad content or sending it back to a designer and waiting for them to do the work when they feel like it? Because you know how those designers are. Just kidding. All right, but let's look at some of these other products right here at the top of the list, and I'm just going to pull up probably the one that's most prevalent here. And that's with a Q. There we go. All right, and what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to play their video. So hopefully this does not bleed into the audio too negatively. So
Creating software is hard. It takes a team of people working together to be successful, but the roles involved communicate in very different ways. Not having a common language results in problems we've all seen, designs that can't be built, applications that are hard to use, or products that just don't meet customer needs. It's like everybody on the team is imagining a different product. Stop imagining and start seeing with Balsamic Mockups. Balsamic Mockups is a rapid wireframing tool that helps you get to the right product together. It was designed to get business people, developers, and designers on the same page before coding starts. Let me show you around by building an application you may be familiar with. I'll start by grabbing a window control and giving it a name. I'll resize it and customize it a bit. Balsamic Mockups 3 has over 75 built-in controls for all kinds of user interfaces. Next, I'll add an image placeholder for the album art. Now I'll add some text. Notice how it snaps into place at preset distances from other objects. Controls also automatically align when positioned close to other controls. In addition to specific UI controls, there are also some generic ones, like this geometric shape control. I'll use the duplicate shortcut to create another button and change the label. I think I'm going to make this first one stand out a little bit more. I'll make it green and add an icon. Balsamic Mockups comes with over 500 icons from the Font Awesome icon set. Now I want to add a track list. I'll add a data grid control and resize it. I'll grab some text that I prepared in advance. Columns in a data grid are defined by separating text with commas. Now for some fine-tuning, changing the inside borders, spacing things out a bit. And I'll show the first row as selected and add a scroll bar. I can choose from images that I've already imported, get one from the web, or just drag and drop from my computer. Balsamic Mockups 3 also allows you to create symbols, which are groups of controls that you can reuse across your mockups. Here are some that I created earlier. These custom controls show up in the user interface library just like the rest. You can also download pre-built symbols that other people have created for things like Android, iOS, and Bootstrap. With Balsamic Mockups 3, you can easily wireframe desktop apps, websites, mobile apps, and more. Switch to the wireframe skin for a more polished look and feel. Link your mockups together and use full screen mode for presentations or usability testing. Balsamic Mockups comes in desktop, web, and plugin versions. Download a free trial today. Happy wireframing!
all right, so kind of get the point there. Yeah, and so that's a wireframing tool. And you can see how very quickly, if you kind of know what you're going for and you have the skill for layout and design, and it kind of helps you along the way, but it can take somebody that really doesn't know how to code, but has the vision of what would look good. And I know a lot of coders, because I've worked with plenty of them, obviously, since I teach them. They're like, I don't have any design skills, right? and like almost in a boastful way. And that's fine. You don't necessarily have to be a designer, and that's probably why you chose coding. But at the same time, people that are in web, a lot of them really are drawn by the design aspects of it, and then want to learn how to make stuff go underneath. And that's why I'm telling you, like, marrying the two skills is pretty important. But that's an example of a top flight professional wireframing tool, and they don't make tools if people don't use them. So there's people that work in large organizations that are planning applications, whether they're operating system native, mobile, desktop, whatever, websites. Having a look that you're shooting for helps a lot. It's the blueprint.
You have to see their stuff render though mobily this way and then this way, because obviously they didn't have anyone who knew how to do it responsibly.
Well, it looks okay to me.
No, look at that. On the bottom, the words. Can you see how they're like in it when it?
Oh yeah, that's because you're using an iPhone.
Well, I'm just like,
Sorry.
It's obviously a special
a
tool.
lot of phones.
If you're making some money, it's worth it. It's only $90.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does not cost a lot of money. Now, of course, if you're doing it on a business or enterprise level and you're buying it for like, a whole team of people, I mean, yeah, there's some money involved.
And like any tool, if you don't use it enough, you can't use fast. I've seen them do this, and they're like, they know exactly.
Oh, right. And you know what? If you saw Muse in action, Muse is like the couple steps above that, where actually what you're putting together you hit a button and it's a web page.
It's that translatable.
Yeah. So it's really kind of an interesting way to work. So these are tools that are out there. So there's also a whole bunch of other websites that you guys probably want to explore. I'm not going to do it here, but there's, and some of these are dated. I think the Yahoo one might be dated at this point. Let's just open it up. This used to be one of the sites that was kind of a go-to for web developers in order to be able to like kind of utilize certain types of design. So you can see like just basic like look and feels of websites. So if you see one that you find interesting, let's say we like this one. All right, and it gives you all the rationale for why it is. And then you can actually go in and start pulling in the resources that build it. Yahoo has a pretty extensive set of developer tools out there. Google has a pretty extensive set of developer tools out there if you really start digging. So I would encourage you guys to explore. Check out some of the links on this slide. I'm not going to do it right now, obviously, because we could be there all day. What's that? Yeah, we don't have too much more here to go. There's this one's kind of interesting too if you guys want to take some time to take a look at it. Have a request for a break, so that's what we're doing. All right, now that we're back from break, we're going to take a look at the next slide here. And we're kind of going back to this concept of sitemaps, wireframes, in the process of planning. And when you're coming into a meeting and you don't know what you're building yet, one of the first things you should do is you should either start making a list, or when you start getting a clear picture, you should start putting together a sitemap. Figure out what kind of pages and what kind of architecture you're building around. What you're seeing here is not an atypical structure, but really the point of this isn't so much the sitemap as it is all the information that goes with it. Providing as much as possible, even numbering things and providing annotations in the sidebar can be very helpful. Here's an example of a wireframe that does have annotations attached to it. Let me go ahead and edit my PowerPoint while I'm giving a presentation. Very professional. All right, but you see the point here is they have an example of a wireframe, and then they have a very, very detailed explanation of what all the components are. So when you're trying to show a proof of concept to like your boss or a client, and I'm thinking that this is kind of what Shelley's thought is, that she's going to come in with a document and show them something. My guess is she's not showing them something that's so blueprinty, that she's trying to show them kind of like a finished product look, which I'm going to tell you concerns me a little bit. I think it's totally jumping the gun, frankly. But that type of information allows somebody to sit down with it and really kind of understand what your design is all about. You shouldn't be making guesses about the stuff you're building. It's an interesting site if you guys want to check it out. I'm going to say too much more about it. It's kind of a helpful site, User Glue. All right, so there's different types of annotations that you can do. Some of them will focus around what functions will be performed if you click on certain parts of the site or take certain actions. There's procedures for proceeding with wireframe development. Notice the little bullet list there at the bottom. See all those things that are going on? Where's coding in the mix? It's not even there, right? There's a lot of work that happens beforehand. And really, you know, depending on how your project proceeds, some of this stuff might be done after you got a proposal in place. But if you're working for an internal kind of thing, this would happen before you even get like a scope of work statement set. So, things to think about. Wireframes can be done even with something as primitive as pencil and paper. In fact, I always offer to people, if you're doing a wireframe and you don't have tools and you don't want to sit there and figure out the tools, you draw it on pencil and paper, or take a picture of it or whatever. Put it on a whiteboard and grab it with your phone.
Big Post-it things we can use. Where are we out of them?
That I don't know. I'm sure they're around. We can ask for some. But that's an approach, because the nice thing about working in that fashion is you're not like really tying up any sort of resources. You're not really using software. You don't really need any expertise, but doesn't mean you don't have a vision. Yeah. And one of my favorite stories to always tell is how Google's got people that do user experience design that just walk around with little whiteboards all day and show stuff to people. I know I've told you guys that, so I'm not going to really expound on it too much more. But you've seen like how Balsamic works. This is an example of Balsamic output. You guys saw the video, so you get the picture. And then here's an example of these conceptions turned to reality. And then when you have really strong grasp of like the kind of stuff that you do as conventions on websites, where the headers are, where navigation is, there's sidebars, images and rotators and content areas, all that kind of stuff, then you guys are getting familiar with all the lingo and the placement of things. You know that when you're doing a wireframe like this, you're doing the wireframe with the thought in mind that, well, it's pretty typical that we put our logo here. It's pretty typical that our navigation's there. It's pretty typical to have a sidebar. Sidebar is a good place for a calendar, that kind of thing. So that when you're doing the design and you get to the point where you're actually building it out, you could still work off of a theme or a template that's pre-built and then tweak it. So, and one of the things that happens when we work with these content management systems, and WordPress is the most notable one, is that it's like you come up with your thought, what you're going to build, and then you find a template that gets you close, and then you start tweaking. Or you take the approach that I've often done, which is I start with a template that has nothing in it, and you just build all of it from scratch. So, but knowing how, the end products work help you actually do the planning phase of it too. All right. There's also considerations for what things should look on mobile and phones. I think that's kind of a no-brainer. And then as kind of a helpful little thing, here's some additional links that you can check out for resources on doing this kind of planning. All right, that's all for this presentation, and video ends here.